What up, y'all? It's me, your favorite shitty internet roommate. And not gonna lie, lately a lot of my days have kind of been like blending into one another. A whole lot of this, if you know what I mean. Almost creating a sort of fog in my head. And to remedy this, I've decided to engage in one of my favorite activities, obsessing over nerdy little details in games and conflating them to be more important than they actually are. That's right, y'all, we're talking atmosphere once again, but this time, atmosphere in Silent Hill. Atmosphere in the context of gaming is when a game uses sound, music, gameplay, really anything, to invoke a certain feeling, to make a gamer feel gamer things. This is kind of a given considering video games are a interactive medium, and thus I think that makes them inherently more immersive than any other medium. Because you are literally playing your character, you are as close to being in their polygonal shoes as you can be, and thus the atmosphere of a game only draws you in more. Which is why I think video games are the perfect vehicle for atmospheric psychological horror. That's why I'm here. Like, literally, I am here. Like, I can't leave. Like, get help. Please. Help! But in all seriousness, while there is a lot of things that make the Silent Hill series special, from its music, sound design, art, and aesthetics, its influences of Twin Peaks, David Lynch films, Francis Bacon art. But what it is that truly makes it one of a kind and continue to draw me back in is really how all of those elements come together to form its atmosphere. And I think you can feel that especially with this fog. It's crazy to me how this fog, which is such a iconic and staple part of this series, and ultimately to me the most evocative aspect of it, was only added in simply as a way to hide the PS1's short draw distance. It's a landmark example of limitations breeding creativity. And I think what it is that makes this fog so evocative to me is because whenever I'm at my lowest, whether I'm depressed, feeling unmotivated, or just not sure about my future, when I'm on my knees begging the universe to please stop hurting me for character development, I've had enough. The best way I can describe what my brain feels like in those moments is like it's in a fog, which is probably why the psychological parts of the series can affect all of us so much. Because in my opinion, aesthetically and ambience wise, it perfectly encompasses these feelings. Like, you listen to that track White Noise, which to me, like, that is Silent Hill. It is the sound of Silent Hill, right? It's dreamy, it's ethereal, but I swear it's also the sound I be hearing in my brain during these moments. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you just kind of like sit at the edge of your bed and you just kind of, whether your brain's in that fog because of a breakup or a loss of a family member, or maybe you just don't know if you're going to be able to pay rent at the end of the month, you know? It can feel scary looking at the abyss of this fog and seeing no light at the end of the tunnel and just having to choose to move forward without certainty. But then you do keep moving forward and you see that light, that maybe that hope that there is some certainty to the future, and you get closer to it and you realize it's rocket money. That's right, folks. Today's video is sponsored by Rocket Money. We all deserve to have certainty in our lives, especially when in our heads it feels like there's a giant fog in front of us and we don't know what's going on or what's gonna happen in the future. Being uncertain if you did budget enough to pay your bills, but also make sure you have food at the end of the month, can be scary and frustrating. But Rocket Money can be that light at the end of that fog. It can be that certainty to help us get on top of our expenses and manage our finances so we can get through that fog and have control of our lives again. Rocket Money can help you cancel subscriptions you might have forgotten about. It can even lower some of your bills and help you manage your money better. I used it recently to just cancel some subscriptions I totally forgot about. And I even used it to negotiate to lower my Wi-Fi bill. So if you need that control of your life again, that certainty of your future, to escape the eternal fog in your head, go towards the light that is Rocket Money. Just go to rocketmoney.com/pitstop at the description or pin comment below to get started with Rocket Money for free. And you can even get more features by upgrading to premium. But with all that being said, thank you, Rocket Money. And back to the video. So today, as I am stuck here, I figured the best thing for us to do is to just allow ourselves to be engrossed in this fog and explore the atmosphere of Silent Hill. that, I mean, I'm only gonna do the first 2. I would do the third, but I feel like I can talk so much more about the first 2 and not as much about the third, so it's kind of uneven, so yeah. But hey, please leave comments asking if I'm doing the others anyway. It helps the algo. And end it with it was foretold by gyromancy, just, you know, for the funsies. Thanks, love you. But first, I gotta put on my middle-aged man looking for his dead daughter jacket. Silent Hill, released in 1999, the same year as classic albums like The Roots, Things Fall Apart, or Mos Def's Black on Both Sides. Also, when they dropped the better adaptation of Hunter x Hunter. And of course, it would be 11 years after this that Justin Bieber dropped the classic banger, Somebody to Love. Now, right off the bat, I want to say that aesthetically, this is my favorite Silent Hill. If you know me, I am a sucker for those low poly PlayStation 1 graphics. Not just stylistically, but also because I think they add so much to horror. There's just something to the uncanniness and crunchiness of these models. It's that thing where like you can almost recognize what you're seeing, but not all the way, and it allows your imagination to fill in the blank and thus increase the horror element. But also just seeing this desolate, lonely town with the destroyed cars and old school buses and things like that, enveloped with this fog in particular is what does it for me. Honestly, it might just be how dense the fog is, and especially the fact that its color palette has almost a purple hue to it. Something about that aesthetically just hits, along with the snow. Oh man. When I think of Silent Hill fog, I think of this Silent Hill fog. It feels like a dreamscape, like exploring an old foggy memory, and because it's an old memory, there's nobody there anymore. It's desolate, everything is dilapidated and ruined and other synonyms. And despite this town being a open sort of area, the fog and the atmosphere of the town make everything feel claustrophobic and closed in. And while we're just talking about more like shallow kind of aesthetic things, we got those sweet ass PS1 menus. You know, when like you open the menu and each item is like a full 3D model that spins around, and then when you click an item that you find in the world, it also shows you it in full 3D. There's just something about that. Like bring that back to modern gaming, please. And what does that have to do with atmosphere, you ask? Shut up. And we'll get into the sound design later, but even the sound effects of the menu. You got the loading screen with that like minimal ambient spacey sound. And then when you click to start the game, it's this deep, bellowing, ominous. Ooh. Even the font of this text adds to the vibe. I don't care, it adds to the atmosphere. I'm using this font for the rest of this video. And moving over to the gameplay, even the limitations of having to use tank controls, I think adds to the atmosphere. Mainly because Silent Hill is a survival horror game. A lot of times you'll find yourself in these tight-ass corridors with enemies, and at times you'll have to do the slowest, most deliberate, agonizing 360 to turn around, and it takes forever. And yeah, it's not fluid, it's not quick, but I think that really does add to the suspenseful horror atmosphere. And it also kind of adds to the fact that your character, Harry, isn't like a super soldier or anything that you would expect from a typical kind of game like this. He's just a dude looking for his daughter. And thus he's kind of underpowered, and even he doesn't have a lot of health, which again adds to that fear and suspense, but also immerses you more in the atmosphere because you can relate to that. Even the types of areas in the game add to this atmosphere. Schools, hospitals, even a mall later on. It's a much more grounded atmosphere for a horror game because these are areas you can connect to. I've been to a school, I've sat at these desks, I've had the best naps of my life life on them. So seeing them kinda dark and empty already is unsettling, and then taking that vaguely familiar and completely warping and tainting it by turning it into the nightmare version, like they just merged school with hell or something. Suddenly it goes from being something tangible I can relate to and just being a little unsettling and scary, to this where now it's completely unrecognizable. Caged walls and floors, chains hanging everywhere, broken desks, molding rustic walls, blood everywhere, evil killer children and ghost babies, bloody corpses ritualistically hanging off the walls. Look, I already got PTSD from when my Yu-Gi-Oh cards got confiscated here. I don't need this right now. But you see, class, I point this all out because it adds to the atmosphere of why this game is so unsettling and terrifying. The thing about Silent Hill 1's atmosphere and kind of the whole game compared to Silent Hill 2, I would say that Silent Hill 2's atmosphere and the game in general leans much more on those psychological horror elements. And thus its atmosphere and horror tends to be more subtle more often than not. And while Silent Hill 1 does have that as well, it's not as much in the forefront. Silent Hill's atmosphere is a lot more visceral and hostile, and it kind of builds up throughout the game. Okay, so to really show this escalating horror atmosphere in Silent Hill, let me do something that I love to do with any game, but especially the Silent Hill series. And that is to pay really close attention to the intro gameplay section. Because usually these sections are designed to kind of prep you and foreshadow what the rest of the game will be like, both mechanically and atmosphere-wise. And that is exactly what this intro does. This intro is my favorite of the series and one of my favorite intros to any game ever. Everything from the music, the aesthetics, the cinematic qualities, and of course, the atmosphere. Okay, so we open in the town itself. The fog is heavy, it's foreboding. Harry mentions it's quiet. Too quiet, which is true, and it only adds to the unsettling atmosphere. The music is minimal but heavy and impactful and ominous as all hell. Your footsteps have that echoey sound to them that only go to reinforce that ambience of the desolate town. Then you hear your daughter's footsteps, so you go and follow them. Unless you're me and you have video game OCD where you have to check every other corner of the map before going down the main path before the game inevitably forces you to go down that path. So you follow your daughter and boom, your first sight is a mangled, bloody corpse. And you'll notice the further you go down this intro section, the music expertly becomes more unnerving and eventually completely deform itself, but we'll get there. But you know, all praise to the Most High, Yamaoka-san. I'll kiss the feet, I'll rub them, I'll suck them. Around here, little elements start being added to the music. There's this like haunting, kind of straining sound, along with these hollow sounding metal drums. Then the game shows off its cinematic qualities with this masterful moving Dutch angle. Like, you know shit's about to be peak when you see this. After passing another gate, it gets darker and your only light source becomes a lighter. Oh my god, the vibe, the atmosphere. The music also becomes more erratic and eerie. There's this ghostly howling sound in the mix. And then you hear this straining kind of sound, and as you approach, you come to find out it's a bloody, turned over wheelchair with its wheel that's unsettlingly, infinitely turning. And then you see a bloody hospital bed, and now it's raining too? And the music starts to sound more experimental and downright deranged. And you hear these pulsating, like, I don't even know how to describe it, whatever this sound is. The atmosphere. Cage doors, even more blood and corpses. Then the music gets a tinge of this ethereal ass sound. It's louder than ever. The experimental noises are just blaring in your ear like an alarm. The OST has become completely foreboding and suspenseful. Reminds me of some of the moments from the Berserk 97 soundtrack. And then you see this hung corpse. And like I said, the power of atmosphere is to put you in your character's polygonal shoes. Which is funny because these shoes, they're like the exact, well, they look just like the shoes that both James and Harry wear, so just wanted to point that out. I'm committed to the bit. Please leave a comment about how cool I am. But point is, just as I'm sure you, when you see this, are thinking, what the fuck is going on? Harry asks the same question before you or him can get any answers. You gotta fucking run. Because you're being attacked by God knows what, and then boom, you wake up. Was it all just seemingly a dream? Absolutely fucking peak ass intro. And like I said, in almost every way, but especially atmosphere wise, it foreshadows the psychological spiraling downcast of the entire game. Everything from how it eventually gets darker, the music becomes more erratic, things start making less and less sense, and there's less things that you can like depend on. While I did say that Silent Hill 1's atmosphere compared to the second is a lot more overt and visceral, the psychological stuff here isn't as in the forefront. The more main storyline is the whole occult thing. But don't let that make you think there isn't some fantastic psychological stuff being done here, especially in regards to its atmosphere. Much like the intro, as you play through the game, everything about it, including its atmosphere, get more and more deranged, as if reality is slowly falling apart throughout the game, until it makes no sense at all by the end of the game, where reality is completely deconstructed. You start in just the regular foggy vibe of Silent Hill, which has this constant unsettling feeling of something isn't right, which only becomes more and more apparent as we progress. But even here, with how often the vibe of the city and the enemies and their sounds unsettle you, when things actually are quiet, instead of seeing it as calm or a respite, the stark contrast will unsettle you even more. Like, I remember as I'm exploring the town, constantly hearing this. For so long, the atmosphere trained me to expect noise. So when I entered this house and it sounds like this, like, nah, what the fuck? Something has to happen here. This contrast of atmosphere had me hitting the Ocarina of Time. When you walk into the Temple of Time, you do the slow walk even though you're not forced to. You know what I mean? The loudest noises here are my footsteps and the way the wood creaks because of those footsteps. I was walking slow like a Nimrod, pants soiled, teeth hitting that, thinking something was gonna break through the window like before and lick my butthole clean. But then, nothing happened. Like, the ambience, the silence was edging your boy. And this effect wouldn't be possible without first training me with the original atmosphere of the town. And this sort of like something is off kind of vibe continues with even something as small as how the characters speak. Everyone in this game has this like stilted Twin Peaks ass vocal performance. Like, they're all like learning to speak for the first time. Except for the church cult lady who's like speaking, you know, Zelda NPC-nese, talking about Flaros and gyromancy. Like, bro, I am unsettled. And as the game goes on and you start experiencing the other world sections of the game, known as the Nightmare, the atmosphere gets more horrific and inconsistent, to the point where you might start losing grip of what is real and what isn't. And this is because, narratively, Harry is also probably losing grip. So once again, to immerse you in his polygonal shoes, they do little things to fuck with you to feel this like losing reality atmosphere. Like earlier, we talked about how you enter a regular schmegular school, which, while yes, unsettling because it's like dark and empty, everything at least is still making sense for the most part. You follow the map, you go through each door, you explore the area. But once you enter the nightmare version of the school, suddenly everything stops making as much sense. And the developers start doing things to mess with you to create this confusing atmosphere. There's that one room where there's a bunch of telephones, so you check and none of them work, so then you try to leave, and as you're at the door, one of the phones rings. Or one of the most fucky moments where the level itself stops making sense. Again, they are trying to use the atmosphere to create this feeling of unknowing, like you don't know what's going on, if it's real or not, because Harry is probably also feeling that and is questioning everything. So in the regular school, you kind of learned, and really throughout the game, to rely on the map. But in the nightmare world, if you go into the girls' bathroom in the bottom floor, the game will actually teleport you into the girls' bathroom in the second floor. So when you leave, you're in a whole other floor, thus throwing off your whole momentum. And again, adding to that disoriented feeling and atmosphere. There's another example of this when you're later exploring the hospital. You're using this elevator to explore all 3 floors of the hospital. But then after doing that, you go into the elevator again, and suddenly, there's a 4th button. Like, that shit is spooky, no thank you. Less and less of the game is making sense and causing this feeling of distrust of everything. And again, adding to this dismantling of reality atmosphere. And this atmosphere is also helped narratively by having lots of moments where Harry wakes up from a dream somewhere else, which narratively makes Harry feel like he doesn't know what is a dream, what isn't, what's going on, and so do you. And this uncertainty of reality will start making you fear everything that's even a bit off, much like how earlier that contrast of the outside world to that house did. But now it's everything. Like, I remember this one area that had this like hallway shot. It feels endless, it feels claustrophobic, the atmosphere is unsettling as fuck, but nothing of note really happens here. It's just a change of perspective. But because the game's atmosphere is creating this uncertainty, it made me fearful of just a perspective change. Another great way they do something to add to this disorienting, uncertain atmosphere, and that whole like losing trust in everything, even reality, was with the radio. It's given to you at the very beginning of the game, and it's constantly in use throughout it. Its sound being a constant warning for coming enemies, until the end of the game. The radio completely stops working, but yet you'll still hear it even if nothing is coming. And sometimes you won't hear it when something is coming, kind of adding to that idea that our player character or the world itself is not making sense anymore. You can't even trust the thing that has been helping you since the beginning of the game, which also reflects in the aesthetics of how the town starts to look. There isn't even really a fog anymore. The nightmare world has made the whole town instead enveloped in darkness. Everything in the end has been completely deconstructed. The flooring has become cages with a lot less walkways. There's rusty wind turbines, less houses than before, or even entrances at all. The roads have turned into grating built on stilts, and now it's hostile everywhere. Reality has completely melted into madness. There's that random ass merry-go-round, which, I don't know, I want to point out because it's kind of cool in this like deconstructed ass like industrial area, that there's a cool like out of context merry-go-round. Like, that's kind of cool looking. The music is now constantly far more alarming, with blaring sirens and industrial banging. And all of this comes to a beautiful, maddening crescendo in the final area. It is the most inconsistent dreamscape nightmare in the whole game. For one, once again, the sounds are fucking with you. You've heard all kinds of things. Doors closing even when they didn't, or laughing around that merry-go-round section, or crying. Now you see this bird cage that's bloody and empty, and yet you hear birds' wings flapping. And once again, because the game is trying to use its atmosphere to make you as untrustworthy and uncertain as the player character's mind is, or at least the world is, and is making the character like that. Now in this final area, the most disorienting place in the game, you don't even get to have a map. We can't trust anything here except our own instincts. Except, can we even really trust those at this point? Because the game's vibes have been fucking with ours and Harry's psyche, which is what makes this final area such a great level. At one point you're in the hospital basement, then the next door you're suddenly at the school again with just one desk in the middle of a whole classroom. Then you're at the antique shop. It's like as if our memories are disjointing and stagnating and puzzling around. And what I love so much is that after coming back to the regular fog Silent Hill, you know how I was in the beginning of the game, you almost feel reassured and miss this atmosphere because you were in the nightmare version for so long, experiencing that even worse and hostile atmosphere. So now the atmosphere from the beginning, which originally you probably felt was a little unsettling, is now almost recontextualized because I, if anything, found it reassuring to be here, which all is just masterful use of atmosphere. And because this is Silent Hill and the OST is such an integral part of it, it has been perfectly driving the vibes and moments of throughout the entire game. The soundscape is far more industrial and experimental, obviously to reflect the more later parts of the game. Blaring sirens, deep bellowing bass, deathly groans, and ethereal haunting. There's times when the OST just goes like full-on metal banging and rattling, which makes the atmosphere feel terrifying and hostile as fuck. Very much the poop your pants and run to your mom after playing the scary maze game type beat. It's crunchy, it's gritty, and real deranged at times. But it also has its lighter moments too, like that beautiful theme that plays during Lisa's death. Or a personal favorite of mine, Tears of ... It's like equal parts melancholic but also hopeful, while also being a ass-shaking trip-hop banger. It genuinely gives me this vibe of like, it's not perfect right now, but everything's gonna be okay. And of course the intro track, which perfectly sets the tone for the game. Those like plucking strings, the hazy background ambience, it's kind of unnerving, eerie, and unsettling. It's like the anthem of when a Hello Kitty girly tells you that she knows a place. And then the trip hop beat comes in, and sure, you might be at a weird cult rally sacrifice with this girl, but hey, at least the vibes are immaculate. But with that, I think it's time we move on to But before we do that, I have to put on my middle-aged man looking for his dead wife check. It's not going to be exactly like this one. It's going to be a little more fashion-y, if you will. It's still a veteran like Vietnam jacket, which I think is what his is, but it's more like bomber. You'll see. Silent Hill 2 released in the year 2001, the same year that Ghibli would drop Spirited Away, the same year that classics like The Blueprint and Toxicity dropped also. And of course, it would be 8 years after this, in 2009, that Miley would have to make the nail-biting and thrilling decision on if she wants to date Jake or Jesse. Spoiler, she chooses wrong, but she gets with Jesse later. Silent Hill 2 is obviously heralded as the best of the best when it comes to this series, and a lot has been praised about it for obvious reasons, and I will be repeating a lot of these reasons, because Silent Hill fans don't care. They will just listen to yet another hour-long video essay about a guy saying the exact same reasons why Silent Hill 2 is good. But ultimately, what I think makes Silent Hill 2 so special is that it decided to hone in on those more subtle psychological elements from the first game. Not to say that there isn't any of those overt scarier moments, fuck that bug room, but those moments take more of a backseat, and a lot more of the powerful horror of this game comes from the lingering, quiet moments, where almost nothing happens, where the horror is subdued. It's psychological, it's subtle, it's below the surface, it's, if you will, silent. I'd say that one of the most immediate things I notice about Silent Hill 2's atmosphere in comparison to the first one, at least when it comes to how the fog makes you feel and the town itself, is that it feels a lot more lonely and somber. Not that it's still not like unsettling and eerie the way the first one was, but just at this time there's definitely a far deeper calming feeling to Silent Hill itself. The atmosphere of the town and the many areas here, this time seeing it empty and desolate, instead of just feeling unsettled, I almost feel comforted as the sound of the fog just kinda lightly passes by the empty windows and buildings. And because of that, it almost draws you in more to its atmosphere and makes you want to just sit in these quiet moments. Those quiet moments become moments of reflection. At least that's how I feel, but also I am a video essayist, so I could be just waxing poetic, you know? But of course, the cool part is how these feelings of longing and loneliness and somberness are reflected in the OST. The soundscape in this game is a lot more melancholic, emotional, and solemn, beautifully incorporating a lot more pianos to reflect just how deeply personal and tragic this game is, while also leaning on that psychological horror element, while having a lot of the OST sounding more ethereal and dreamlike, being very unsettling and isolating. The very first theme of Laura kinda lets you know from the jump that the vibe in this game is gonna be very different. While still having a little interpolation of Silent Hill 1's theme, there's a lot more sadness and personal emotion to this one, rather than the more immediately scary vibe of the last OST. The soundscape is ambient, it's ghostly, it's haunting, while also using ethereal soft rock and soft piano ballads to pull at your emotions and heartstrings. If the first game's OST has a soundscape that's more like horror coming from your gut, then Silent Hill 2's music sounds more like horror coming from your head. And kind of to hone in on Silent Hill 2's atmosphere of loneliness and horror, we could really just take a hard focus on the first real area that you explore, the apartments, while you could also explore some of the empty houses in Silent Hill 1. With Silent Hill 2 being on a much more powerful system, it allowed them to really flesh out and really bring life to each and every single room in these apartments. Every one of the rooms you explore is just claustrophobic with detail, allowing them to be a lot more lived in, and thus when you see them empty, that pathos, that emotion, that melancholic atmosphere feel much more powerful, overall giving a much stronger feeling of immersion and world building. One of my favorite little details in one of these apartments was seeing the wall carved scratches of what I assume is, a family lived here and they scratched on for each of their kids' heights. Ooh, the pathos of that, man, the pathos. Yo, if my English teacher saw me right now, they would be geeked. Exploring these apartments thoroughly will give you a slice of the types of lives that were lived here before they became completely empty, and thus increasing these feelings of isolation and loneliness. But also Silent Hill 2 uses this more subtle, lonely atmosphere to enhance the horror. I mean, right before you even enter these apartments, outside is loud and abrasive, and then you walk in, it's just quiet. Once again, you know how that shit gets me. My butthole is puckered so tight it's become a black hole. There's such a deep psychological fear that comes from the silence of this crummy, run-down, torn-down, moldy apartment complex. The most unsettling part is just exploring these hallways. You can only see so far into the distance before you just reach a black abyss, making you not only fear what could come out of that abyss, but also just how long and winding this hallway must be. Very heavy liminal space vibes here. Silent Hill 2's atmosphere has more of a focus on that lingering, getting under your skin and deep inside your brain psychological horror. And a perfect example of that type of horror used in this game is how they first introduce Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is the most iconic, almost more iconic than the series itself, and deeply scary enemy of the entire game. And the way you first see him is just casually. As you're walking through the deep abyss hallways, you reach the end, and there's just some bars, and he's just there, standing menacingly, and you cannot interact with him right now. And that is the genius of Silent Hill 2's horror and atmosphere. It's not trying to jump scare you with its most iconic enemy. It doesn't want to just give you a real quick fright so that you soil your pants. No, it wants you to sit with that horror. Let those soiled pants fester and cause your mind to just fog. That's so funny. Introducing Pyramid Head in this way is so genius because it makes the already pretty unsettling atmosphere of these apartments even more unnerving. Now, instead of just getting that immediate jump scare type fear, now instead you will be going through this entire apartment complex subconsciously thinking he could be anywhere, giving way to this growing fear of anticipation and atmosphere. In fact, almost every time that they use Pyramid Head is another great example of how they use atmosphere to scare you even more. Since you've already fully interacted with Pyramid Head in the apartments, they need to find a different way to scare you with him again, and they pull it off expertly in one of the hospital areas. The atmosphere of the hospital is a lot more hostile and loud, with blaring enemies all the time. Your ears will be consistently being trained for noise, and thus when you reach the rooftop and it just sounds like this, just this deadly silence. I love the choice of making the area, like the skybox around, just completely pitch black. And then you explore the rooftop a little bit and you get some items, and you might be thinking like, finally a reprieve from the constant hostile atmosphere. You can't even trust the silence. And this is perfect because you have already seen Pyramid Head, so you know what that sound of that gnawing, scratching on a chalkboard, dragging of that blade is. Which makes you hit that MCU humor, he's right behind me, isn't he? And I really want to hammer this home that, while yes, Silent Hill 2 does have its more hostile and just like, typically kind of horrific areas. In fact, in terms of horror and fear, I would say it has one of the best areas of the whole series with the Historical Society. Not just in gameplay and level design, all that kind of stuff, but also in atmosphere. Nothing in this level makes sense, and it makes less sense as you go through it. Start in the painting room, getting a bunch of cool lore and history on things like Pyramid Head and the town itself. Then you go down your first hole, and then you end up at a bottom of a well that has seemingly no exit, which causes a feeling of panic because, claustrophobia, ho ho ho. Then you break a wall and you get to that like grimy brick area full of water, which has this one section that's just like completely upside down. Again, nothing making sense, adding to that disorienting, creepy ass atmosphere. And again, to fuck with you psychologically, you enter this room that is just giant, and despite it being so big, again, to add to this feeling of like you don't know what's going on, it's a completely empty room. Like, it has all this space, but for nothing. The only real thing to interact with is the noose hanging thing. And you keep hearing this like burrowing sound that amounts to literally nothing, which is, oh, this game is so good at fucking with you with its atmosphere. Then you go into this morgue that has just like cramped, stuffed, piled corpses, and you go deeper again, and now you're in this like small, cramped little room. The way this area just fucks with you is unreal, because then the only thing there is like this one door, and then you open it and it's just another hole. So you're, oh man, you just don't know what to expect. And you might actually feel a little safe and reprieve because you reach this one area that has like, little health packs to help you out. But once again, you cannot trust the atmosphere of this game because boom, that door behind you closes. And then you go down a long elevator ride. And the thing is, nothing of real note has happened for like a minute, but this unsettling atmosphere, this anticipation that this game is so good at, leaves you still completely terrified of what might come. After you go through a labyrinth, you'll reach this like graveyard that has 3 tombstones, one of them with your name on it, and guess what? The next hole is the one with your name on it, so whee! From here, a lot of great moments happen. You save Angela, she deserves better. You kill Eddie, he deserves worse, he killed the dog. And pit after pit, you just keep descending and descending, and you keep going lower and lower into the earth. And once again, as a final, like, you don't know what the hell is going on, kind of, showing, adding to this sinister, disorienting atmosphere, after doing all that descending, somehow, you end up at a lakeside. And as cool as all this is, you might be wondering why I'm kind of speeding through what is probably the best area in the whole game, as opposed to it being my like main talking piece, is because once again, the parts about Silent Hill 2's atmosphere that really are the most evocative to me are the more subtle, little quiet moments. The atmosphere that enchants me even more than this whole area itself is the descent into the area. This iconic long-ass staircase. It feels endless, and it constantly has you in this lingering feeling of anticipation, as you're hearing nothing but this like deep, guttural, wailing horn, and the like downpour and decay of the sound feels as endless as the staircase itself. The deeper you go, the more your teeth do the dog thing, the more your knees do quiver, the more your shivers be timbering, and the more your butthole puckers. And then, with all this anticipation and all this atmosphere building you up, you reach the door, and it's nothing. Nothing at all. Just a room. That is what makes its atmosphere so masterful. The way it just can fuck with your brain, because it's psychological horror, baby. Out of everything I've talked about today, these are the two words I want you to remember more than anything else. Immersive schizophrenia. So a big thing that applies to Silent Hill's atmosphere, and just a big thing with Silent Hill, is sound. They talk about it a lot in the behind the scenes making of videos, where they want to create this feeling that the sounds are under your skin, this feeling of unease, which they nail. And if you've played any Silent Hill game, there's this thing they do with sound where they just kind of fuck with you. Basically, they'll play a sound, any type of sound, a scratching sound, a door closing, a knocking, a crying, basically a sound to make you think something is there, something is coming, something is at all happening, and then you check and nothing is there at all. It was just a sound implemented into the game with no payoff. And while this technique is in all the games, the reason it works again so well in Silent Hill 2 is that deep personal connection with James. And because the world is a reflection of James's psyche, and thus you as the player, so these random sounds, on top of adding flavor to the atmosphere, putting you on constant edge and making you feel unnerved, but also adds to the narrative of James possibly losing his mind or forgetting things. James probably feels like, what's going on? Is he hearing what he's hearing, or is he losing his mind? And now you, the player, are also in a similar state. I caught myself multiple times while playing the game hearing something like a knock or something, and I check in the game if there was something, but there wasn't. And that happened so often to the point where I started to take a headphone off and kind of look behind me, because, well, if that sound wasn't anything, because, nothing happened in the game, so maybe it wasn't from the game, maybe... Do you see what the atmosphere is doing to me? Because James feels disoriented, because he feels like he doesn't know what he's hearing or what he is and what's going on, now so do you. Like, I was literally worried that, maybe it wasn't coming from the game. And all of that was done with atmosphere. And thus, immersive schizophrenia. You and James have soul resonanced your psyches. And that is probably the biggest compliment that I can give to any game's atmosphere, that it can make me in real life look around like I heard something in my own house. And like I legit looked crazy. It is because of all of these elements, the music, the aesthetics, the gameplay, and the staging of these scenarios, all coming together and in their best form here on this game, that is what makes the atmosphere as great as it is. It is what makes the most iconic moments of this game be so impactful. And yes, that was just set up so I can just talk about my favorite and the best moments of this game. Like, take Maria's first death. The area is cramped, you're getting chased by the most terrifying enemy in the whole game. Everything is suspenseful. The atmosphere has your adrenaline up to 1,000, and all you can think of is to get away. So much so that you might not even be worried about Maria. If anything, you've kind of gotten accustomed to her character just kind of popping up after you, go through a door. And man, the way this unfolds after, where James is just kind of falls to his knees in defeat. The scene feels hopeless, and then Magdalene plays, which is such a perfect OST for this moment. The music has that kind of weak and hopeless, and there's just nothing you can do anymore, kind of sad soundscape. And I love how this OST, again, adding to this feeling of isolation and loneliness, there's just these really like little spaces between each key, almost sounding like the person who's playing the keys isn't like fully sure which key to hit next. And I love the choice of keeping the OST playing as you're leaving the area. The atmosphere enraptures you, and you once again want to do the slow Ocarina of Time walk. You're not forced to walk, but you just feel like you should. On the other side, though, you have the long hallway walk section where you hear Maria's conversation with James. And I think it was so brilliant, atmosphere-wise, to have this moment not have any music and really just let you sit with this very uncomfortable conversation. It's truly such a depressing listen, hearing her kind of mood swing from telling James to leave and then begging him to stay. The voice acting here is superb. Superb. Listen to me, fucking dictionary.com head ass. Again, it's the combination of all these elements that allows for these moments to feel the way they feel, for the atmosphere to be the way it is. Like when you hear the OST of Truth, once you find out the deeply upsetting truth of what James did, and he just sits there, and the TV is fully static, and the camera is just kind of slowly panning. Oh my god. And the way the soundscape adds to the atmosphere, because it sounds exactly how this moment should sound, which sounds stupid to say, but like, it must be hard to create such a perfect soundscape to such a unique moment. Once again, I will kiss the feet! And I love how the atmosphere of this cutscene carries over then into the gameplay. Because after finding out and you start to leave, the aesthetic of the hotel starts to change. It looks like everything is draining, like paint is coming off the canvas. Like as if James's perceived reality is decaying. Like a memory in your head is fading. And the music that plays along with this gameplay, again, adds so much to the atmosphere. It sounds like the soundtrack to the most whirling, spinning headache, or that agonizing, weighty feel when you know you did something wrong, or just like when you just know shit is cooked. You know, like your partner of multiple years hits you with the I didn't ask you to do that. Please! I need help! Oh, I got through. You know, earlier in the vid, I talked about how when it comes to Silent Hill's atmosphere, the most evocative thing to me is this fog. That's why I was drawn here. That's why I'm stuck here. And I feel it even more so with Silent Hill 2. You know, with Silent Hill 1, the world and the way it was created, while it was based off of Alessa's nightmare, that was something that was kind of revealed at the end and something you could find clues for, but it wasn't really the focus. And on top of that, Alessa's not exactly the main character. Whereas in Silent Hill 2, the way the world is based off of your player character's traumas and fears, which on its own makes the story a lot more personal. But even in general, it's very obvious that the team really wanted to hone in more on these personal stories of not just our character, but of all the characters. In this game, the power of Silent Hill is to kind of draw in these people with these traumas and guilt and problems, and kind of use Silent Hill as a precipice for exploring these characters' fears. And you know, horror games in general create these spaces where we as players can feel comfortable in the uncomfortable. They allow us the ability to explore our fears. So it only makes sense that Silent Hill 2's horror is that much more powerful, because it's exploring some of the most core, deepest fears of any humans, our traumas, our problems. I think that's why so many people specifically connect to Silent Hill 2, because it's a game that uses horror as a way to express not only our flawed main character, but a bunch of flawed characters. It's a game that doesn't end with you beating the big bad monster at the end. No, it ends with our main character facing his guilt and past mistakes and trying to grow from them, or maybe not growing from them, or completely letting himself be engulfed by them. And I guess to talk about what this has to do with the atmosphere. The atmosphere of the fog, while again, as always, unsettling, there's still this feeling of comfort to it. And this is literally by design. In the making of Silent Hill 2, they talked about how their goal was to make something that would disturb the players, but also attract them. And I feel like a lot of players really connect to Silent Hill 2 in that same way. I mean, recently for me, there's been a lot of pretty big life changes, and some days can be really tough because you might wake up and you kind of just wish you didn't, you know? And as I said before, it's in those moments where it feels like in your head there is this fog, and there's just this little you trying to run through this fog that seemingly has no end. At our lowest, it's like we all have our own little Silent Hills, our own little personal purgatories in our heads that we just keep trying to move through. And look, like I said, I'm just your shitty internet roommate who talks shit in front of a green screen. But I do put a lot of myself into this. I really try to like chip away at my soul and heart to connect to whatever art I'm specifically talking about, which is probably why, once again, Silent Hill drew me back in at a time when things aren't so good and I am in that fog in my head. The reason I think that there's such a weird atmosphere and feeling of comfort that comes from Silent Hill and that fog is because similarly, when we're in those really bad places, when we're in those fogs in our head, sometimes I feel like I don't really have the strength to keep moving forward, you know? There is a little comfort to just kind of sitting in it and letting the fog atmosphere kind of enrapture you and letting yourself be engrossed in it and just sitting in it. Sometimes you do just rot in bed all day, infinitely doom scrolling. There's a comfort to just sitting in that fog because it's easier than moving forward, because why move forward if there's nowhere to go? I have nowhere to be. Like, why waste my steps moving towards nothing? That's why a character like Angela is so tragic, because she deserves literally everything. Like, she is great. Like, she literally did nothing wrong, but she is so engulfed by her shame and her guilt that even though we think she should be able to pull herself out of that fog, pull herself out of those traumas and rise above them, she doesn't. And she just gets completely engulfed by the flame of her guilt. It's tragic, but I'm sure we all get it too. The atmosphere of that fog is comforting. There's a comfort to that trauma because at least you can control that. At least you know who you are within that fog, because sometimes you don't see anything beyond the fog. There's no certainty of anything. We don't know what's beyond that. For all we know, it could be something even worse. I know for me in my little personal Silent Hill, I tend to at times wrongly self-blame and kind of try to put everything on me, and it's my fault even when it isn't. Oh, hold up, there's like a knife flying at me. That was weird. That's where I find myself most engrossed in the atmosphere of the fog in here, in my own Silent Hill. And I find comfort in just blaming myself, because at least then I can control that, you know? If it's my fault, I can fix it. If it's theirs and they're not willing to change or be better, then I can't do anything about that, because it has to be my fault. Why would someone want to do these bad things to me unless I'm bad? If I'm actually a good person who was wronged, why wouldn't they want to fix their problem? Don't I matter? Am I not worth it? I wasn't the problem. But the more time I sit in the comfort of that fog, suddenly things that I would never agree with start making so much sense. I have to be the problem. I have to be, because if it wasn't my fault, why wouldn't they not see me as worth it? They don't see me as worth it. So I'm clearly the problem. I clearly was the one that was the problem. It's my fault. It doesn't matter that everybody else is telling you it's their fault. It's not. It's mine. It has to be mine. No, that's the only thing that makes sense. It has to be my fault. I am the problem. I deserved everything that happened to me. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's always been my fault. Sorry, self-doubt. I just listened to Bleach ending 2. Now I can do anything. Now that my dopamine levels are skyrocketing, I was able to escape my own personal Silent Hill. And I think we all have the power to do that. Don't get me wrong, some days it's fucking tough to feel like you could ever traverse the fog of your traumas. You're gonna have bad days, especially when you feel like there is no certainty beyond that fog. And you might find yourself thinking it's more comforting to just kind of stay in that fog and let it engulf you and completely just lose who you are and become a shell of a person. And it could be the Bleach ending 2 blaring in my ears, but I believe we are not our traumas or burdens, so we shouldn't let them consume who we are. I find it works for me to remind myself that we always have the choice to move forward and be greater than what we suffer. So learn to forgive and love yourself and try to move forward through that fog. After all, suffering is a part of life. You either learn to live with it or you go under. So listen to Bleach ending 2. Thank you so much for deciding to light your bonfire here on this little corner of the internet. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would really appreciate if you gave me a like and a subscribe. It'll keep me out of that fog in my head. And hey, if we're being personal, think of these comments as a complete safe space. Go ahead and comment what your personal Silent Hills are. What gets you in that deep fog in your head, and how do you get out of it? And if you really want to support your boy and keep videos like this coming, then you can do that as little as 3 beans on my Patreon. There should be a link up there. If not, you can check the description too. It's usually in there. Or if you're an absolutely insane person that really wants to help me pay my bills, you can join my highest tier on Patreon, which is how you get one of these pixel art characters that show up throughout my videos, and it's a lot of other cool stuff. And actually, we have quite a few new Pitstopper tier people with pixel art characters we gotta shout out. First, we got my boy Oreo right here, who was just kind of a Chad, sent a picture of himself, said, "Give me a fucking Buster Sword," and called it a day. Look at this shit. Came out sick as fuck. Love this one. Then we got Aronis here, who actually based his off his very own comic Forsworn, this being the main mech of his own series. Here's some reference shots so you get an idea of what it looks like in the comic, and here's the pixel art. I think it came out really cool. And I think it's really cool for him to actually shout out his comic book this way. And we actually have pretty much another mech right after that, because right here we got Rhea, who based their pixel art off Constructor X from Bomberman. Then we got Navi, who's an absolute weeb. We love that for them. Who got their character based off Ayano. And I think it came out really cool. Like, legit, this looks like it could be like the main character of an indie game. I think it's the long scarf. That just says like indie game to me. I don't know. Then we got my boy, Generation 3 Pavel, aka Moki, my guy. Basically, I think he fused a picture of himself, clothes and hair, with the Yu-Gi-Oh card Moki Moki. I live for this character. I hope this man never leaves my pit stoppers, because I need this character floating next to me at all times. He's gonna be right next to me in every one at the end of all videos now. Once again, if you want a pixel art character and a bunch of other benefits, you can do that at my Patreon at the highest tier. But with all that being said, thank you so much for coming to this little pit stop on the corner of the internet. Peace.